Hello everyone. Today I'm beginning what will quite probably be my last playthrough series in OOTP ever. I will be taking over the Oakland Athletics, and there are a couple of reasons that I've chosen this team. The first reason is that they are, as you probably know, going to be moving to Las Vegas in the near future, so I want to celebrate the time that they've had in Oakland and also protest the move since I am opposed to how it was conducted by Major League Baseball. But, anyways, another reason I'm choosing this team is that it is a very difficult team to rebuild in OTP. The 2023 Oakland Athletics are probably the toughest team in OTP in recent history, with a pathetic market, a horrible owner, and really not a lot of talent to work with after their recent fire sales in real baseball. So essentially, this is going to be a pretty challenging rebuild. I will be doing 5 years up through the 2026 season, or excuse me, the 2027 season, which should be or is estimated to be the first season that the A's will play in their new stadium in Las Vegas. I will not actually be moving the A's, but we will be playing up through that point in time. Anyways, before we hop into this game, I'm going to quickly go over some of the settings that I've got in this league. So first of all, I have relative ratings off. So there's that. Ratings varying the max are enabled. That's about all that I've really done on this page. I have enabled showing player personalities as I usually do. I have turned off some cosmetic settings. I have also left the trade difficulty. Actually, I'm going to kick the trade difficulty up one notch. This is far easier than I would consider realistic, but for the sake of this team being so terrible to rebuild as it is, I'm not going to make it any harder on myself because I don't want to spend a ton of time on this by kicking the difficulty up all the way, leaving trade preference at default. I've also changed the ratings weight, which should make this more difficult as well by making the ratings more heavily weighted by 10% in AI evaluation and reducing the value of all of the statistics weights. So essentially, the AI will be a little less likely to undervalue players. As for our league settings, I haven't changed very much. I've enabled trading of players greater than 7 days injury, as I believe should be enabled by default and is just a kind of common sense thing to do. I have disabled inflation because for OOTP, I don't necessarily think it's a necessary thing to do. I have slightly reduced the baseline for the player development budget because two reasons. First of all, no team is going to be spending $40+ million a year on player development in OTP, or should be when that is half of their budget, which it would be in our case. And in the past, it was at $12 million, so we're just going to move it there since the rest of the finances have largely remained unchanged. And for some player generation, I have also disabled the hard international amateur cap. I don't believe that it is useful to have the hard cap. I have increased the number of international amateur players that will be generated every year. I have left scouting discoveries at default and increased international free agents, but I have decreased the number of independent league generation players, and that is going to cover a majority of the settings that I have touched here. As for one other thing I want to note here, I have taken control of the commissioner mode briefly and set up all of my staff from the beginning. This is because I would be signing all of these players anyway. The AI does not usually contest your ability to sign staff. I did not sign players I would not have been able to sign, or excuse me, I have not signed staff members that I would have been unable to sign without using commissioner mode. I gave them all fair salaries. And I made sure that they're signed through 2027, which is when our playthrough will be concluding. So essentially, I left some things untouched, people that I didn't necessarily think were a problem to have. But for a majority of our staff, I have changed things up. And that's, like I said, I did it in such a way that it would just have made it a little less annoying to get these staff on hand anyways, without really affecting our ability to play through for the better or for the worse. Anyways, with that said, I'm just going to quickly highlight the moves I expect to be making with this team, and then I will be just skipping ahead to the point where I have transactions set up for you to see. So, first of all, we have pretty much no money to spend. I really like having a lot of money in player development, especially since this is likely to be a pretty deep rebuild with how poor the Athletics are at the beginning of the game and how little money we have to work with. I may try to make this team competitive, but I really expect that it might honestly be more valuable to do a miniature tank with maybe trying to get the fan interest up slightly so that we can potentially see um, an improvement in the team's overall position without overcommitting our resources. Now, nobody's on a big salary, but guys like Aledmus Diaz, Trevor May, Jace Peterson, who just have any kind of money at all, almost certainly going to be gone. I'm going to be trying to add some top end prospects where I can, but essentially, I do not really expect that there will be that much else to do here. One other thing, I really don't like that the fan loyalty is so low, and I believe that having a budget this small is kind of ridiculous. So I'm just going to quickly. No, actually, you know what? We'll leave the loyalty low for the sake of a challenge, but realistically, this is not true for the Athletics. Or if it is true, it is ownership's fault essentially for quite literally destroying the modern Athletics in the past 5 years or so. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and jump into trying to make transactions with this team now, and then we will see our financial situation and other factors heading into the season with where the team stands. All right, we have here our first trade set up, and this is one that I've been making in pretty much all of my saves, or at least a similar version of this. Essentially trading for all of the A's, or excuse me, all of the Reds' young stars. So first off, we've got Edwin Arroyo, who is almost an absolute must-have in my books these days as prospects go. Very solid hitting potential. Our scout still hasn't scouted him recently, but OSA is actually even more favorable. Excellent fielding, which is actually his strongest appeal. He's a very good second baseman or even borderline shortstop, given the weaker defense in live starts in OOTP. But ultimately, all this package comes at only 19 years old, and he's really not that expensive to get, all things considered, with his true talent. He is definitely one of the stronger prospects in OOTP, and very glad to be picking him up here. Our next big name is Michael Ciani, who is probably the best center fielder in OOTP live starts at the moment. Not a bad bat, gets on base at a decent clip with mediocre power, and the center field defense is really the big pull here. He's the best defensive center fielder, arguably even the best all-around fielder in live starts with 80 range and strong air and arm to boot. Not bad base running, so he'll be a big part of this franchise. We're getting Tyler Stevenson, who was an interesting decision for me to pick up. I'm not actually sure if we're going to be keeping him or trading him, but a very strong hitting, solid fielding catcher, leader. Ultimately, a very good all around package. Could be another cornerstone if we decide to keep him around. We will also be acquiring Will Benson, who's another one of my personal favorite trade options. He is going to be at least getting a possible consideration as a starting corner outfielder with very strong defense in either right field or left field, more probably right field, and not a bad bat. Decent on base and power abilities to boot. We've also going to be picking up a couple of pitchers. Number one is going to be Brandon Williamson. Very nice starting pitching prospect from the Reds. Very strong stuff, solid movement, mediocre control, with room to grow on velocity in particular if he does develop anymore. Altogether, a very nice young pitcher. We'll also be acquiring top prospect Connor Phillips, who is very high stuff potential, very strong movement, and not bad control. Decent chance to reach it with high intelligence as well. Almost 22. Solid prospect right there to help fill the farm out. And Riever San Martin, very strong movement stuff combination with decent control. He could slot into the bullpen as a long reliever. He could be a starting pitcher. So we'll see where he ends up in the long term. But ultimately, we're going to be accepting this trade, giving up Tyler Soderstrom, who is one of our more valued players. A strong hitter, no questions about that, but ultimately just limited to first base or designated hitter defensively kind of limits his value. Dalton Jeffries, he's out with Tommy John surgery. He's all control, so ultimately not that valuable, regardless of his mediocre talent at the moment. Daniel Suzak, another one of our more valuable players. And yeah, it does cost a little bit, but I mean, considering that the A's really don't have much valuable players, getting this kind of package at all is just ridiculous. But Daniel Suzak, a nice high power catching prospect that I can afford to part with. Zach Galoff, who is a not bad third base prospect all around, but a little old, so not likely to reach his potential, and with a pretty toxic personality. And last up is Colton Johnson, who's pretty much just tossing as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, we will go ahead and continue with our transactions. All right, our next trade is going to be with the Boston Red Sox. Today we're going to be acquiring Tanner Houck, very solid starting pitching prospect, high stuff, high movement, or not necessarily prospect anymore, but a very solid starting pitcher. Richard Blyer, who they think is actually negative value on his contract with very high movement control as a relief pitcher. Josh Winkowski, I hope I got that right. He is a starting pitching prospect with solid all-round stuff, movement control, could slot in potentially to the rotation. Blaze Jordan, a nice first base prospect with very solid all-around hitting ratings. And Nico Cavadas, who is one of my favorite targets in OOTP early on, could be a DH, could be a first baseman, but very nice hitting ratings overall and very cheap to acquire. Prankster as well. We're going to be giving up, as far as I'm concerned, nobody. This is going to be headed by Paul Blackburn. He's making $2 million and is a mediocre starting pitcher. In my opinion, just worse directly than Houck. So that'll be it for this trade, and we'll go ahead and do the next one. All right, we have here a deal with the Miami Marlins for Nasim Nunez, classic OTP shortstop prospect with very nice defense, Edward Cabrera, starting pitcher, and Huascar Brazoban, a very nice reliever who should be a good addition to our bullpen. We'll be giving up Jordan Diaz, essentially a useless first base prospect, and Micah Dallas, a no-namer. I'm not actually sure if we're going to be keeping Cabrera, who will be the headliner of this deal, around. I just think that it's very surprising the Marlins would give him up for so little, so he may just be flipping him to another team. I don't like that he's outspoken. His movement and control are a little iffy for me, but he's a decent pitcher nonetheless and could slot into our rotation should we be unable to get something better from him. Next up, we are going to be making a trade with the New York Yankees. The highlight of this one is going to be Clark Schmidt. Very nice starting pitcher. Very good stuff movement and control, especially with the stuff. Trey Sweeney, a nice infield prospect, could potentially play. No, never mind. I believed he could play the outfield, but I was incorrect about that. Very solid all-around bat, though. Anthony Sigler will also be coming over. A decent catcher, solid defense overall, decent personality, and really nice eye, which makes his bat overall not too bad. And Albert Abreu, a solid reliever who's probably going to be more depth than a particularly reliable pitcher for us, but we will see. And in return, we're going to be giving up Garrett Acton, who's essentially a nobody, and Brett Harris, who is a mediocre third base prospect, to complete this one. We will now be making a trade with the Seattle Mariners, one of my favorite players in OTP right now. Matt Brash, just truly dominant stuff movement combination. Very good starting pitcher overall. We'll also be getting Jared Kelenic, who's having a really nice season in real life, and will be a solid corner outfield option. Good base running, good defense, a solid bat. Isaiah Campbell will be coming over as well, a leader, decent reliever. Could slot into our bullpen, and Lazaro Montes, a very raw prospect, and pretty much just grabbing as a flyer to help improve our farm system and potentially lead to either a trade chip down the line or a solid prospect for our team. The big player going over here is going to be Esteury Ruiz, who's not a bad hitter, a very solid fielder, and of course a very prolific base runner. We're also going to be giving up TJ. I'm not going to try with that last name, but essentially a no-namer. Osvaldo Barrios, another no-namer, and Royber Salinas, a not bad relief prospect potentially, but I would consider him close to a no-namer as well. Our next trade is going to be with the Tampa Bay Rays to get one of my favorite players as well in live starts. Next to Matt Brash, sticking to your rotation, Jalen Beeks. Very high stuff, solid movement and control. Could also end up being a very high leverage relief pitcher option. Jose Siri, who would be our starting center fielder if not for Michael Ciani, but still going to be a good option as a utility outfielder potentially, or just a solid backup. Taylor Walls, a good utility infielder. I'm not sure exactly what we'll use him for yet, but overall solid bat and glove. And a couple of relievers in Graham Stinson and Colby White, who will likely slot in towards our somewhere in our bullpen during the season. We're also going to be giving up Aledmus Diaz, which will free up a lot of money for us. Tyler Baum, who's basically a nobody, Jorge Juan, who's basically a nobody, and Garrett Irvin, who's basically a nobody, to make this one happen. Next up, we're going to be making a trade with the Baltimore Orioles. Keegan Akin is going to be headlining this one. A very nice starting pitcher. Stuff, movement, and control, all very good again. Drew Rom, another starting pitcher option. Very good stuff, movement, and control once again, but could also slot in as a reliever. And we've got Dylan Beavers, a nice corner outfield prospect coming over. Solid all-around bat. We'll be giving up Luis Morales, a mediocre starting pitching prospect, and a couple of, once again, nobodies to complete this trade with the Orioles. We'll be making a trade here with the Houston Astros to acquire Brian Abreu, who is a very nice reliever or can also start potentially. Very good stuff, solid movement, not so great control, but certainly something you can live with for a player of his caliber. We'll be giving up Tony Kemp, which is essentially just salary freeing. So overall, very productive trade for our team here. We'll be making a deal here with the Kansas City Royals to acquire a couple of very important players. First off is Nicky Lopez, who will probably be our starting shortstop throughout this save. He has some of the best defense in out of the park, especially on the infield. Solid bat, not really the greatest hitter, but certainly workable. We're going to be acquiring MJ Melendez, who will be providing a captain spark to our dugout. A very solid bat as well, power eye combination, and can either work in the outfield with solid corner outfield defense or as a catcher, although I don't love his ability very much. And also, we will be getting Dylan Coleman, a very nice relief pitcher who will certainly be towards the back end of our bullpen, one of our higher leverage guys here. We'll be giving up a decent package to make this work, though. First off is Gunnar Hoglund, not the best starting pitcher, but one that's received some interest from other teams. Mason Miller, who's honestly not too bad as a starting pitching prospect, though his low movement certainly does harm his overall talent. Luis Medina, another relatively solid starting pitching prospect, though at 24, he's unlikely to fully develop. And last up, Jacob Waters, who's essentially a toss-in to make this one completable. We have here a deal with the Minnesota Twins to acquire a number of useful players. First up is going to be Ronnie Henriquez, a very solid starting pitching prospect, good stuff, movement, and control. Ryan Jeffers, a solid catcher who could be a backup or potentially a starter with a decent bat and mediocre defense. Giovanni Moran, a very nice relief pitcher who can also potentially slot in as a starter, though his stamina is on the lower side. Michael A. Taylor, who is another really good utility outfielder option, excellent defense, and a mediocre bat to boot. Edouard Julien, who is certainly one of the most intriguing Twins players. I'm sure most would agree with that. In both real baseball and OOTP, very nice eye and an overall pretty solid bat, though he's likely going to be restricted to first base or designated hitter. Emmanuel Rodriguez, a nice corner outfield prospect, very decent bat overall with a decent glove to go with it. Rafael Cruz, first base prospect, who's pretty much just here because he was inexpensive. And AJ Labas, a starting pitching prospect who's here for the same reason. He is older and unlikely to pan out. We'll be giving up in return catchers, Jonah Bride and Carlos Perez. Neither of them are particularly special. And starting pitching prospects Chen Zong Ao Zhuang and Wander Guante. Neither of them I consider particularly valuable. We are here going to be acquiring O'Neal Cruz from the Pittsburgh Pirates, very underrated player in OTP. An excellent third base prospect here. He's obviously not got the range to be a shortstop, but very good arm. He certainly slots in quite well at third base with good bat and solid potential as well. We're going to be giving up for him JP Sears, who's a solid pitching prospect, but not really top tier stuff, and Luke Anderson, who I would consider to be a nobody. Okay, we've got a deal here with the Milwaukee Brewers. We'll be acquiring Garrett Mitchell, very solid corner outfield prospect. He is still a prospect. Good all-around bat, solid base running, and very strong defense. Starting pitcher Aaron Ashby, who's on an affordable long-term contract, and also very good overall. despite his low stamina. Strong stuff, decent movement, and okay control. We'll also be acquiring one of this year's big breakouts, William Contreras, a very nice hitting catcher. Not the best defense ever, but certainly workable. We're going to be giving up Joey Estes, a decent but certainly expendable starting pitching prospect, Shintaro Fujinami, who came over from Japan this year and has been interesting for the A's, but is selfish and not necessarily the greatest pitcher. I don't love his control, so we'll be able to give him up here. And then a couple of toss-ins, essentially just to get Ashby's retention up to 50% here. But yeah, overall, another productive deal for us, in my opinion. That's kind of funny that William Contreras is the first All-Star we've dealt for to boot. All right, we got a bit of a big acquisition here with the Philadelphia Phillies, picking up Andrew Painter, who is one of the bigger players in out of the park overall. We'll also be adding McKinley Moore, a nice relief prospect, Andrew Vasquez, another solid reliever, and Nick Nelson, a decent starting pitcher. He'll be giving up Ken Waldachek, our top prospect, but certainly nowhere near the quality of Andrew Painter. Jared Kelenic, who I actually did not intend to trade, but was very heavily valued by the Phillies, so I believe to get Painter he was worth giving up. Colby Thomas, a decent outfield prospect, but also worth giving up, and Kirby Snead, who is essentially a reliever that I gave up to get Nelson thrown into this deal. Very similar Tamp, obviously. Nelson's the starter, and Snead is injured, so I figured that that would be an upgrade overall. And we've got here a big trade with the Padres acquiring mostly prospects. First up is going to be Samuel Zavala, a very good corner outfield prospect, certainly one of the better value trades to get. Very well developed for a 19-year-old, and of course, the defense is quite good as well. We're going to be getting Daniel Montesino, another corner outfield prospect. He's really more of a slugger and not such a good fielder. We're going to be getting Michael Baez, a very good reliever, should slot well into our bullpen. Nabil Crismat, a very strong starting pitcher, could be an effective asset for our rotation, and Adrian Morejon, another strong starting pitcher. He will be out for 2 months, but a good pickup nonetheless. To make this happen, we're going to be giving up Connor Capel, a decent corner outfielder, Johnny Butler, a nobody, Zach Jackson, a decent starting or relief pitching option, but one we can ultimately give up here. Drew Steckenrider, a decent reliever. Michael Goldenberg, essentially just a utility player. And Arubiel Angelis, a decent utility infield prospect. We're also getting $7 million in cash in this deal to help our finances and give us a decent cushion. All right, we've got a trade here with the San Francisco Giants. We're going to be acquiring Grant McCray, a very nice outfield prospect, has potentially the ability to play center field. Very nice base running, very nice bat. Heliot Ramos, a very solid corner outfield option that we'll be considering for this year. Evan Gates, a good relief pitcher, and Camilo Doval, one of the better relievers in out of the park. We'll be giving up to get this package Shea Langoliers, a decent catcher. Austin Beck, pretty much a no-namer. Blake Beers, a no-namer, and Emmanuel Rodriguez, who we're giving up pretty much for Camilo Doval, 1-for-1. We acquired it from the Twins earlier, but ultimately I think Doval just brings more value to our franchise overall, so we will be making that one happen. We've got a trade here with the Dodgers, which is essentially a salary dump. We're going to be giving up Manny Pina for Ivan Castillo, who's on a minor league contract. And yeah, freeing up a little bit of money for our franchise here. We got here a trade with the Boston Red Sox, which is essentially going to be a two-way salary dump. We'll be getting Kike Hernandez, who is going to be a pretty solid all-around utility player, prankster, decent bat, decent glove. You'll be giving up Ramon Laureano, who is also a spark plug, but essentially just doesn't really have much value for us right now. And Jace Peterson, who's on a 2-year deal, really not useful to the franchise. Heliot Ramos is going to be a bit of a kicker here. I don't think he's a particularly valuable player. Our finances are going to be relatively unaffected, but obviously for next year we're going to be a bit better off. And I do believe that Kike is going to be more valuable to our franchise than these players will be at the moment. We are going to be trading here with the Toronto Blue Jays for another captain, Cavan Biggio. Another also utility player, though he could start potentially in a corner outfield slot or somewhere else. And we're also going to be acquiring relief pitcher Zach Pop. Good movement and control, not bad stuff as well. And $5 million. We'll be giving up here Kyle Muller, who's a decent starting pitcher, but not really one we need. We've filled our rotation out pretty well. And Brent Rooker, who's having a great year for the A's in real baseball, but not the best in out of the park. We've got a trade here getting rid of a couple redundancies. We have no need for William Contreras or Nick Allen, so we're going to be dealing them to the Guardians for Josh Naylor, who I am quite frankly likely to trade as well, though he could slot in as a first baseman or designated hitter, and Joey Cantillo, who will be a solid starting pitcher or potentially relief pitcher for us as well. Josh Naylor is indeed going to immediately be flipped over to the Los Angeles Dodgers for Alex Vesia, who will be a very significant bullpen upgrade for us. We're also going to be shipping Zach Pop over, acquired earlier from the Blue Jays to make this one round out, and of course to free up a spot in our bullpen for Vesia. All right, we're going to be dealing Seth Brown to the Yankees for Osvaldo Cabrera, who is essentially the same kind of talent, but more versatile. So he's likely going to serve as our utility infielder this year, or a super utility player possibly, and getting some cash back as well to sweeten this one up. All right, with that last transaction, I believe that I am relatively happy with our roster where it is, so I'm going to be going through what the team looks like heading into opening day, and then I will likely be dishing out a couple extensions over the course of our lifetime running this team to make sure that we can keep our critical players. So our rotation here is going to be Matt Brash, who is going to be very high stuff and movement and mediocre control. Actually, I've already covered all these players, I believe, so I'm just going to go through them. Keegan Akin will be number 2, Clark Schmidt will be number 3, Nabil Krismat is going to be number 4, and Brandon Williamson will be our 5th starter. Camilo Duvall will be our first stopper, and Jalen Beeks will be second. For those who don't know, stoppers are generally more reliable at getting your pitchers into high leverage situations than a traditional closer setup man role. We've got Brian Abreu and Alex Vesia, who I've set to lead our bullpen by pitching more often in middle relief. We've also got Michael Baez, Andrew Vasquez, Huascar Brazabone, Giovanni Moran, and Dylan Coleman in middle relief, and Tanner Houck will be in long relief. So ultimately, I think this bullpen is just ridiculously good. We should be one of the best in the league for sure in that regard. The rotation is pretty strong. We don't have any really true aces. Matt Brash is closest to that, but ultimately the entire rotation is pretty good overall. In our lineup, batting first, we got Garrett Mitchell in left field, Edouard Julien at first base, MJ Melendez in right field, Tyler Stevenson who will be catching, O'Neill Cruz at third base, Cavan Biggio will be starting at second, Nico Cavadas will be our designated hitter, Michael Ciani will be our center fielder, and Nicky Lopez our shortstop. This is not an offense I'm particularly confident in. We have decent hitters pretty much across the board. I think Nicky Lopez is our truly only net negative in the lineup, but we don't have any star power. So I'm other than Stevenson, who's probably the closest thing we have to a truly high quality hitter. And if he develops O'Neill Cruz bat 24, I don't expect him to gain too much more. Garrett Mitchell could borderline reach that level as well. But ultimately, this is more a lineup that should be good than great. The defense is pretty good. I'm very happy in particular about, for example, Garrett Mitchell in left field is going to be awesome. I'm happy with O'Neill Cruz at third, Nicky Lopez at short, Michael Ciani in center. All of those are going to be very well covered positions with those guys potentially making a run for the Gold Gloves. Our backups are going to be Ryan Jeffers at catcher. He's very good backup leader. Not the greatest defense, but a touch of catcher ability to help our very high stuff pitchers, which we have a lot of, and a pretty good power hitter to boot. We're going to have Taylor Walls as our utility infielder. He is going to be bringing some decent defense to the table with a mediocre bat and some base running as well. And Michael A. Taylor will be our utility outfielder with very nice defense and a decent bit of hitting. Kike Hernandez will be our super utility guy, although he's also going to be starting at first base VL instead of Julian, given how splitty he is, and the fact that Kike also hits quite well versus left-handed pitching. He's got decent defense everywhere. He's a prankster, so everything will work out pretty well in that regard, I think. As for our chemistry, we've got two captains in Biggio and Melendez. You got three leaders, Walls, Stevenson, Jeffers, a spark plug, Nicky Lopez, and two pranksters in Kike and Cavadas. We have no negative personalities, so I expect that this team should do pretty well from a chemistry standpoint. Now, ultimately, I'm actually pretty happy with this team. I think this is a team that has the talents to absolutely compete for the playoffs, which, especially on our budget, I'm quite surprised to be able to say that. Almost everyone is still in pre-arbitration on this team. There's very few players who are even arbitration eligible, obviously with the exception of Kike and Michael A. Taylor, who are not critical and likely going to be departing the team after this season. A lot of these other guys are DFA'd. I have absolutely no use for example, Drew Rukinski or Jesus Aguilar. As for our farm system, we got a pretty strong farm system here. Andrew Painter obviously is going to headline the farm. He's going to get some time at AAA when he comes off the IL. I'm hoping he can develop quickly and eventually step into our big league rotation to be a highly productive starter. Edwin Arroyo, very nice prospect who I hope will eventually take over our role at second base, which is, with Biggio, who I'd like to see in more of a utility role long term. Currently starting, it's definitely a position where we could use that upgrade. Connor Phillips, another very nice starting pitcher. Samuel Zavada and Grant McRae, both very good outfield prospects. And local player Max Muncy, who starts, of course, in the A's farm, could probably end up in left field long term with a pretty good bat, so we'll keep an eye on him for sure as well. Got a number of other interesting prospects that we will also have our eyes on. So I'm pretty happy with the farm system. I will be pumping the full $36 million, which is a third of our budget, into player development this season. The rest of our money is going to go towards international amateurs in the draft, which I have not put any money in as I usually do. So hopefully we can get some good prospects from those places as well and get a good season together. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start giving out extensions, and we'll take a look at those. Our first extension will be going out to shortstop Nicky Lopez, who's getting about $5 million a year. Really not a very expensive demand for a player so valuable defensively, and given that he was already in arbitration, getting him so cheap is definitely a big win for our franchise. Next up, we've got our ace, Matt Brash, who is also going to be relatively inexpensive over a 7-year contract. I'm going to quickly just give him... we won't give him a starting pitcher promised role because he could slide into relief conceivably, but very affordable ultimately in the long term for Brash there. Likewise, our number 2 starter, Keegan Akin, is going to be pretty inexpensive over the lifetime of his contract. Only wants about $4 million at his peak, which is, of course, quite cheap for a pitcher of his talent. Clark Schmidt is also going to be ridiculously cheap at less than $6 million a year. I think there's got to be something very weird about OOTP's extension logic right now, even different than when I was looking at it most recently, which would have been before the last update, because it is very strange to me that these players want so little to be extended through their peaks. Nabil Crismont will also be taking $5 million a year. It is a good thing, though, that these pitchers are willing to take so little money because how little we have to give. So being able to get every single player at $5 million a year, yeah, that'll be almost within our budget. We really need to make sure everybody is cheap. Okay, this Jalen Beeks contract, I'm 100% convinced that the AI's extension logic is broken. He wants a 1-year, $4.2 million for an extension, and he's willing to take a 5-year deal with $3 million a year. This is questionable at best, but I'll happily retain one of our top relievers at such a cheap price. And of course, he is also more than capable as a starting pitcher. Another top reliever who can flex as a starter, Brian Abreu, will be taking around $5 million a year through his peak to stick around in Oakland. Kevon Biggio is also in a weird position of demanding less in an extension than in a 1 year deal. We're going to retain him because he's a captain and valuable utility player, even if he's not going to be a starter for the entire duration of his contract. Okay, I have no idea what's going on here, but the fact that Michael Ciani is willing to take $5 million a year at his peak is just absolutely bonkers to me. This is a ridiculously affordable contract for a superstar center fielder, so we're absolutely going to sign him to that. Just my opinion is that if he were to go to arbitration, he'd be making probably more than $5 million in year one, even with OTP undervaluing defense. So very strange. All right, MJ Melendez is going to be our first extension here. The biggest reason that I'm willing to give him this money is because this $13.5 million is the last year that we're actually going to be playing the save. We can trade him if we need to, and he is also a captain and probably our one of our top hitters right now. So definitely should keep him around if we can until we can find offense from different places. All right, I think that's going to do it for our extensions for now. I will let you guys know if I make any more transactions, but this is going to be our opening day Oakland Athletics roster. I doubt much is going to change. This is probably going to be, for the most part, the team that we're going to have going through this season. So the biggest things that are going to happen during the year are, of course, how our team performs, since we will be hoping to make the playoffs in a tough AL West division, which, frankly, I think all 5 teams right now are probably going to be competitive. And our ability to add more prospects through the draft, international amateurs, and potentially get some players through the Rule 5 draft at the end of the season. And of course, free agency will be coming as well, though we will not likely have the funds to get many significant players. With that, we're going to go ahead and simulate. I will check in on a monthly basis with an update on the team. All right, we are a month in, and as expected, the AL West has been very competitive. The Rangers currently hold the worst record at a 500 even, so even though we are over 500, we are still well underneath the lead of the division. We are currently a game and a half out of the first or the last wild card spot, rather, currently held by our rivals, the Astros. The team overall, I'm fairly happy with how the offense has done. And I know that we're going to do better once Garrett Mitchell gets fully trained in left field and O'Neill Cruz gets fully trained in third base, for example. But I'm very disappointed in how Keegan Akin and Matt Brash have pitched to date. For the rest of our pitching, I mean, I'm really happy. Our bullpen has a ridiculous sub 200 ERA to date, and our Stars ERA is still fourth best in the AL. So we're looking pretty good for the most part. Just need to obviously get a couple of people going, and then our team should be in a good spot to make a playoff push here. I made one minor transaction to acquire Spencer Picard for a pitcher who came off our injured list. He's pretty much never going to see the light of day. I got money out of that deal. That was really the big appeal. But just to keep everybody updated, he is now in our organization. Anyways, I will check back in after another month. Okay, well, we had a pretty tough month, which culminated in the injury of O'Neill Cruz, who was admittedly not being the most productive before his injury. But our hitting really splatted, and we did not get Matt Brash or Keegan Akin going as I had hoped. Both of them struggled during the month as well for the most part. Garrett Mitchell really came back down to earth in a very heavy way. So did Tyler Stevenson after both of them had very good first months of the year. And we've got some guys towards the bottom of the lineup who are just not producing at all. Biggio's been very disappointing. Gavadas has been very terrible. Ciani's been poor. Nicky Lopez is honestly, this is about what I expected from him, so he gets a bit of a pass there. The bullpen is still keeping this team largely together, though it also came down a lot from last month. And right now, the fact that Clark Schmidt has probably been our best player to date is very disappointing, although he is admittedly having a very nice season so far. Anyways, we're going to hope for a bounce back month in June and to see ourselves get back up in the standings, hopefully within wild card reach once more. All right, well, it was not necessarily the best month of June, although we did put up a winning record over the month. However, we have had the TCR train arrive at the station with O'Neill Cruz, the primary recipient. He has jumped up to a proper superstar third baseman. I will definitely be giving him a contract extension shortly. his defense is excellent. His hitting is now ridiculous. So when he comes back from his injury, we can expect a true jump to our offense that we really need from a proper top tier hitter. Other good news, Nico Cavadas has hit TCR, and he is now a much better hitter overall. His contact went up, his eye went up. I believe his power might have increased a little, gap power specifically. So we're looking pretty good now with potential increases to our offense internally. Uh, Ultimately, though, our offense really needs to boost. We're not looking good outside of stolen bases. Our run prevention, though, is downright ridiculously good. We're second in the league, third with both the bullpen and Stars ERA, and that should frankly be better because we had the best FIP and zone rating in the league by a fair bit. So we should have good things coming soon. And I'm hoping for a positive July. We might be active for a big bat or something at the deadline because obviously our offense is literally the only area where we need improvement and it really needs improvement. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with where this team is other than the record. Okay, we have completed the first year player draft and we've added some interesting talent. As one would expect, the top talent, Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, did not slip to our sixth overall pick, but we did get a very nice player, Caden Sorrell, outfielder, high school player, very good personality. I have high hopes for his development with that. Very nice potential on the bat with really strong traits all around. Good defense, so very nice top pick there. Luke McNeil, I was actually considering with our first round pick. I was really surprised to see him available. I think this is a supplemental pick. Yeah, the first round supplemental pick. So ridiculous that one of the top talents in the draft fell so far. Solid with the intelligence, and at 18 years old, he's pretty well developed, especially with the changeup at 90-mile-an-hour velocity right now. That could go up as well, which would further boost his stuff, and of course, 3 of his 4 pitches here. He's got that excellent stuff movement control combination and very much looks the part of a frontline starter should he develop. Even if he doesn't get all the way there, he could be a quality player, but certainly our best pitching prospect other than Andrew Painter at the moment. Our second rounder, Dylan Cup, I was pretty happy to get him as well. He's got a good bat and solid second base defense where he will probably slot in long term one day. An overall very good player. We got a couple more pitchers here. Justin Lujernik, I'm guessing is how this would be pronounced. Another really good personality, young high schooler, not even 18 yet. Pretty good development so far, and he's only 89 miles an hour velocity, so you could certainly count on that trending up. His slider sinker playing up even more. These changeup pitchers generally are quite risky, but when you see that they're pretty well developed, like a 40 overall right now, that's a good sign that they'll continue to develop or at least not be a liability in terms of not being able to reach the starter role long term. All right, we got Justin Lee as well here, who is another similar pitcher in a lot of ways. He's a little older, but overall just about the same target. And our fifth rounder, so our last round with a slot demand, was Daniel Cuvette or Cuvette. I'm not sure which one it would be. Biggest power in the draft, so nice that we got him so late, but he is going to be a first baseman or poor left fielder defensively long term, maybe even right fielder since he's got a little bit of an arm, but ultimately he certainly could use some help on defense, but the bat is certainly very legit. We're certainly hoping that that turns out, but again, he's a high schooler, so it's a very questionable thing. Next up, we took Paul Wilson. He's very interesting. I think he's got some of the highest potential of any high school pitcher, or just pitcher, period, in this draft. But he's very risky. He's less developed than most of his peers. This changeup is a little bit concerning, especially with the guy who only has 3 pitches. The upside is what we're hoping for, but I do fully expect that he will bust. He does have more velocity, though, so he could absolutely reach the upper echelons of velocity and potentially be a dominant pitcher at one point, but I wouldn't count on it right now. And our last player who got a bonus was Will Gasparino, solid defensive corner outfielder with another pretty strong bat. You'll notice that all of these players are high schoolers. I did take a couple college players after this, but for the most part, we're hoping for the upside to hit And I mean, honestly, if just a couple of these players turn out, we're going to be in really good shape with our prospects because of how much potential we have in this draft class here. So I'm pretty happy with what we got. I genuinely think all 20 picks I made have good talent. So we're going to definitely keep an eye on it and see where we can get. All right, well, we have a very interesting trade here with the New York Mets. They chronically undervalue Edwin Diaz, so we're going to be getting him 100% retained. Best reliever and out of the park at the start of the game. Obviously, he's out, I think, for the maybe not for the entire year, but I believe it's for the entire year. So we'll be getting him back for next season. But he is 100% retained. We are also picking up Brett Beatty, one of the better young hitters in this game. So he's likely going to be replacing Julian long term, although I'm not exactly sure how we want to utilize him yet. We will see. I will definitely update you guys at the end of the month. We're giving up very little value. Enrique Hernandez has been off to an incredible start to the season, so his trade value has skyrocketed. He has a 128 OPS plus so far in almost 200 plate appearances. He's been much more productive for us than I would have expected. Obviously, very happy with his performance, and he is still absolutely a valuable super utility guy, but I think getting this deal done, freeing up some space for the international amateur period, it's going to be more valuable than keeping him on the team for the rest of this one season where he's under contract. We're going to be giving up to round this one out a couple of minor prospects: Clark Elliott, Yavair Torialba, excuse me, and Darrell Hernandez. So nothing too dramatic on our side going out, and getting two obviously very big time players coming back. So should help us improve our team. I'm hoping Brett Beatty can be the spark to our lineup that we need in order to improve the offense, in addition to obviously O'Neill Cruz's TCR. Okay, the deadline has passed. We are officially into August, and I have decided not to make any major transactions. So essentially, this is going to be the team we're going to be running with for the rest of the year, with perhaps the exception of call-ups such as Andrew Painter, who's going to be the big one to look for, since most of our other prospects are not yet major league ready. We finally got good months from Matt Brash and Keegan Akin. We had a pretty solid month overall. O'Neill Cruz hasn't quite produced the hitting stats that I would have hoped. So the big news is injuries for this month. Nicky Lopez went down with an injury. MJ Melendez went down. I called up Will Benson to replace him, and he went down with an injury after one game. So pretty rough go of it. We are now on to Oswaldo Cabrera, who's back up playing right field. And I brought up Edwin Arroyo to replace Nicky Lopez. I'm considering keeping him up as as our starting second baseman when Nicky gets healthy again, because I'm just not thrilled with Biggio's production, and I genuinely think that even offensively, Arroyo's not that much worse, even at age not even 20, at 19. And given that this is a 6-year simulation, it doesn't really matter if we don't give these guys an X, or if we service time doesn't matter, is what I'm basically trying to say here. So I'm hoping that we could get some more offensive production down the stretch. I'm hoping Brett Beatty contributes. I'm hoping that we get more out of O'Neill Cruz. I'm hoping the rest of the lineup can produce. I'm really unhappy with Cavadas right now. I would have surely hoped for at least above average production from him. But anyways, down the stretch, we're hoping to see more offense, keep our pitching going, and that should be hopefully enough to get us into the playoffs. We're only 2.5 games out, so it's certainly a reasonable stretch to get there. Anyways, I'll check in with you guys in September, and we'll have a more clear, or excuse me, in August, at the end of August, beginning of September, we'll have a more clear view of the team, and we'll probably have, I think, September call-ups up as well. All right, well, it is September, and we've had quite an interesting month of August. Pretty good overall. We had Cavadas finally have the big month we were hoping for. Our offense came alive for the most part, and we have propelled within 2.5 games of the last wild card spot, currently held by our division rival Mariners. New York Yankees are only a half game up on them, so hopefully we can close that gap a little bit. Matt Brash still has not performed as expected. A large disappointment, the 1.5 Home runs per nine definitely holding him back. The walk rate not ideal either. Even for his low control, you'd still expect it to be better. Keegan Akin has finally gotten into shape. Garrett Mitchell is actually leading the American League in stolen bases to date, which unfortunately is where most of his value is coming from, as he has not been the most productive hitter. I also decided to not only keep Edwin Arroyo in the lineup, but ink him to a long-term extension to make sure that he will be sticking around Oakland for the future. He'll get more productive as he evolves defensively. I'm also currently debating who I want to call up between Andrew Painter, who I am strongly considering as one of our call-ups, and Connor Phillips, who is having an exceptional year himself and has developed quite nicely. One of those two will probably be coming up and taking the fifth spot of our rotation, potentially higher. I'll likely also be calling up a hitter, though I'm not exactly sure who I want yet. Probably a position player, and to be honest, who I'm liking the most right now is going to be Trey Sweeney, who's having a very nice season himself and is quite well developed to this point, so he could serve as a bat off the bench or um, utility player or something for us down the stretch. Anyways, we will be checking in here when we're close to elimination, and then I will simulate all games until the end of our season. All right, we are down to the last 5 games of the regular season and in a dead heat for the final wildcard spot. The Mariners, A's, Yankees, Red Sox, and Guardians all competing for the last 3 playoff spots. With the Angels not technically out of it yet either in the AL West lead, and I'm not sure about other divisions as I have not checked yet, but we will certainly look into it. Right now, the A's, Yankees, and Red Sox all tied for the last 2 spots. So this is getting pretty intense. We had a series against the Mariners earlier, won 2 out of 3, but wasn't quite enough as they've been playing very well lately. As of course we have in order to be in this position down the stretch. All right, game number 2 against the Twins, and we lose 6-3. That's a very unfortunate loss. We really need to win against the Twins with it, and this is real bad. We're now fighting with the Guardians and the Red Sox for the last wildcard spot, and we have a series against the Angels, our division rivals, and a very difficult team. And the last game of the season will be against Shohei Ohtani. Lose 7-4. This is not looking good. This is a really, really bad time to go on a losing streak. So now, oh nope, second to last game of the season is now Shohei Ohtani. And we do beat him 2-1. Winning against Ohtani is a big deal. We'll take a look at all of this later. And our last game of the season against Chris Paddock. It looks like we have been eliminated. I do believe we have been eliminated. I think the New York Yankees have the tiebreaker on us. So unfortunately, even if we win this game, we will not be in the playoffs. Yeah, very, very rough ending to the season as we built a team that was playoff caliber and just got a little bit unlucky to miss out. Still a very good season overall, though. I'm especially encouraged by Andrew Painter's development. He is looking very nice. I think that he is certainly going to be our ace going forwards. Lots of good things from O'Neal Cruz, who's now looking like one of the best hitters in the league, although he certainly didn't perform it this season. And overall, I think we got a really strong core together if we can actually perform up to our true talent level. But yeah, it's a good place to be in where our run prevention is so good. Only 631 runs allowed. Anyways, we'll go ahead and watch the playoffs here, and then end the day with the international amateurs. Now, actually, I believe that those are technically next season's international amateurs, but I will do the initial parts of free agency. Okay, this is very annoying. I guess we are going to have to demote Nick Nelson then. All right, wild card round. if we can ever get through it, that is very annoying. Jalen Beeks getting hurt down the stretch definitely didn't hurt us or help us either. Our top reliever, Mariners, Twins, Phillies, and Braves advance. I really do not care about any messages I am receiving right now. Both of these AL series could be short. The Twins sweep the Angels. Good. Mariners win against the Rays. Dodgers advance. And the Cardinals advance. I do believe, and of course now we get Jalen Beeks back. I'll demote Williamson. I honestly don't know what his role on the team is going to be. Our rotation is looking pretty full. He had a good season, so he might be a good trade chip. All right. Anyways, Dodgers win against the Cardinals, and we're going to have a Dodgers Twins World Series, which unfortunately I think the Dodgers will probably come out victorious in. Aha, Edwin Diaz is healthy. This is really good news. Best reliever in baseball. Mets are paying his entire salary for us. So I'm going to demote Huascar Brazabone. I don't really know what to do with him either. He's a good reliever, but we just don't really have the space, so he's been more of a depth piece for us. And the Twins come back, but the Dodgers do win the World Series 4-3. Garrett Mitchell does lead the AL in stolen bases, though, tied with Historia Ruiz for the season stolen base title. All right. Anyways, I'm going to take a look at free agency. I really do not. Wow, Gavin Stone got DFA'd. What the heck? We're just gonna go ahead and claim him because there's literally no reason to not do so. Um, I think we're gonna probably end the day with the Rule 5 draft when we get there. But for now, I'm gonna take a look at the free agency pool and make some decisions, though I do doubt that we are going to sign anyone of particular substance in this free agency period. All right, we have a very interesting deal here where we are getting what I would consider to be a lateral catcher upgrade to Jonah Heim from Tyler Stevenson. Jonah Heim is not that much worse of a hitter and an excellent defensive catcher, especially on the catcher ability, which is really going to help our guys like Matt Brash with high stuff and lower control. And I really wanted that, especially for our bullpen, which is just dominant stuff. We're also going to be adding Nathaniel Lau, which will enable another move I intend to make shortly. A very solid hitter at first base with higher on base skills and decent power as well. So hopefully he can be productive. We're also going to be throwing in two no-namers in Bryce Conley and Bradley Basso and getting $2.5 million in this deal as well. So ultimately just a solid improvement of our team. Okay, this is a very interesting one. We are going to be trading Brett Beatty and junk for Jake Eater and $25 million. And this is why we picked up Nathaniel Lau, so that we would be able to trade Brett Beatty. And frankly, Lau is just a little bit of an upgrade over Brett Beatty's current ratings anyway. So Jake Eater, I was interested in acquiring last season, but he was impossible to get. Now, for some reason, he is available, even though he's improved his ratings and looks like a frontline starting pitcher in the making. So absolutely going to be a huge addition to our rotation here. And losing Beatty is not the worst thing ever here for us. This is a pretty linear trade, and I'm not going to include any more like this because it's very minor, relatively speaking. We're going to be getting infield prospect Carson Rucker and Yusei Kikuchi, who will probably be non-tendered, in return for McKinley Moore, just a reliever that we don't really have room for on our roster. So not a big one here, but a trade rather, that improves our minor leagues. Okay, I originally said that I was going to do the Rule 5 draft as the end of this video, but it is running incredibly long considering that it was the first video introductory and I made, of course, a massive amount of transactions at the beginning. So on the next one, we will be covering the off season, the rest of the moves I make, and then jumping into the 2024 season. I'm not sure if starting with the next one, I'm going to do the off season at the end of the video, but we will see. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, you guys, and I will see you on the next one.